Today, what I want to share with you is the one skill that is the unlock to growing and scaling your company that most people don't ever do. How to recognize leaders with high potential. The reason this is so important is because the potential of our business rests in the strength of our people. Okay, so having the right people is by far the most important thing that we can have in business. Therefore, being able to spot the right people is arguably the number one skill that you want to have. So I know what you're thinking, which is like, wait, being able to pick the right people is more important than strategy, marketing, sales, cash flow, product? Yes, and why is that? Okay, because the right people will select the strategy and build it, build the marketing, manage the cash flow, design the right products. So people picking is actually a more valuable skill than even being the most talented person on the team. In fact, if you look at the best CEOs, what do they talk about? They don't talk about how great they are. They talk about their teams and the people that they're able to select to be on their teams to help them realize their vision. This is why when people say people trump strategy, culture eats strategy for breakfast, all of these sayings. Here's the thing, in the beginning of having my business, I did not understand this. I didn't understand it because I hadn't lived it yet. And the disadvantage a lot of people have is if they're still small and they haven't grown to a size where their team is actually able to move the business forward, they have this contorted view of reality that they are the most valuable person on the team. But the reality is your ability to build a great team and to select the right people and to train the right people and to be able to spot potential in the right people is more valuable than any one skill that you yourself can have. And so the question is, how do we recognize high potential leaders so that we can continue to have a high potential company? Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of one of our portfolio companies. People always seem to think that when they're like, wow, Alex and Layla growing companies, what is this fancy magic they're doing, right? Okay, let me tell you what we actually did to grow this company. So business reached out about 4 years ago and they were doing about 15 million a year. They were dealing with a very common set of constraints that a lot of businesses do. All the founders were basically doing everything, literally working 18 hours a day. They were pulling their hair out. They were like freaking out, super busy, right? They had unicorn employees, which are people that like have immense key man risk, that everything relies on them. They felt like it was a roller coaster. Nothing was consistent month over month. And so it felt like it was this consistent up and down, and they didn't know if they were going to go out of business next month or if they were going to explode. And so what they looked like before, 15 million in revenue, and they had about 7.6 million in EBITDA. Great company, good margins. However, we said to ourselves, let's see what we can do if we get the right people in this business. Because when I looked at what existed, they had the right product. They had product market fit. They had the right marketing. They had a machine that worked. And what happens is that a lot of people, they only have one tool to use to grow their business. And so they keep using that tool like a hammer. But at some point, you need a screwdriver, or you need an axe, or you need a spoon. And the reality is that you yourself probably don't know how to use every tool to the best of your advantage. And so we said, we need people with different tools to grow this business because we know that the founders, they're really good with a hammer, right? And in this case, it was marketing, but they weren't necessarily great with a screwdriver. They weren't great with an axe. They weren't great with a chainsaw. And so we needed to find people who were. And so what did we do? First thing we did is that we reoriented the founding team. We clarified roles. We turned one of the founders into the CEO. We turned the other founder into the chief product officer. We then identified their chief operating officer out of their leadership team. Then we brought in the best head of sales that we knew. We brought in a 10 out of 10 marketing director. We got a solid controller in place. We found a head of development so they could build an engineering team. And we found a head of people to hire and manage. What did that allow us to do? Because before 15 million, 7 million in EBITDA, where were we now? We grew the company to 70 million in 3 years and is on track to do well over 100 this year. How did we do that? Well, we were able to build out a back-end product which added about 20 million a year in profit. Why were we able to do that? Because we had somebody overseeing operations and delivery. And then we were able to increase sales by 20% and profit from that about 6 million per year. Why? Because we finally had someone that was able to grow sales. Then we were able to scale our marketing by about 50%, which resulted in equivalent revenue growth. And why was that? Because we finally had someone that could scale the marketing team, not just be good at marketing. And then lastly, we were able to use the profits from the increase in revenue and EBITDA to then invest in building a software team, which we used to build out that development team, which then increased the enterprise value by about 5 to 6x. So what did that result in? A company that with the right people, we created 170 million in enterprise value in less than 3 years, all from finding the right high potential people. This is not because we said now every one of the founders needs to go learn sales and marketing, all these things. We said we have to get good at picking the people. And specifically what we do at acquisition.com is for our portfolio companies, we pick the people for them because we know it is a very rare skill to have. And so the question is, if you're watching this and you have your own business, you're like, that sounds great. I would like to go from 15 million to 70 million as well. Then what you want to do is you want to be able to identify what is a high potential individual in your company. How do you know that somebody has the potential to be a leader in your company that can make change and grow the business? And that is what I want to cover today. So what is a high potential player? HPP, somebody who possesses three things. One is the capacity, two is the character, and three is the motivation. I'm going to break these down so you understand what I mean by this. Because saying these words is great. It's like be honest, trustworthy, all these things. Okay, but what the hell does that actually mean? And that's what I want to talk about. So the ideal leader, let's break down capacity. Capacity is the true top capability of a person. Okay, so what is their ceiling? A lot of you have probably heard of the Peter Principle. Someone will continue to perform until they hit their level of incompetence, right? Like you're competent here, competent here, competent here. Oops, you get a promotion, now you're incompetent. So the question is, how are you able to look at somebody and say, what is their capacity? How much room do they have left? If you hire somebody to be a salesperson, how do you know they have the capability to become a sales manager, to become a sales director, to become a CRO? And so you want to figure out, what is the capacity of this person? The second piece is character. Okay, character is the display of mental and moral qualities in someone's behavior. Now, specifically for your company, you want this character to demonstrate your values. And so for me, I might look for something different than you look for. I'm going to look for somebody who has competitive greatness. You know, they're doing this because they want to be excellent, not because they want a paycheck. I'm looking for somebody who has sincere candor. Somebody who can be candorous, they can be honest, they're not worried about being too transparent. And lastly, I have unimpeachable character, which is somebody who I want to associate with as a company and publicly on and off the field because they are a person of high moral integrity. Those are three things that I look for in the character of a person. So for you, you have to ask yourself, what do I look for? What are the values that I need this person to be aligned with so that they uphold what I have as my standard for character? And lastly is motivation, because you can have somebody who's got super high capacity, who has amazing character, and they have no desire to do anything. And so what is motivation? Motivation is how much willingness or desire this person has to do the job at hand. If you're missing any one of these things, it messes up the equation. Because somebody has amazing character and they're very motivated, but they just can't get past a level, they have low capacity and that caps them. Whereas if you have somebody with high capacity and high motivation, but they do things to achieve things in a way that goes against your values, that doesn't work either. And then lastly, if you have someone with high capacity and high character, but low motivation, then you have somebody that has all the potential in the world and no desire to capitalize on it. And so that is why you look for somebody with capacity, character, and motivation. When I'm hiring people, I literally think through this in my head. I'm like, do they have the capacity? Do they have the character? Do they have the motivation? If they have those three things, they are probably somebody worth investing in. And here's the thing, these people are all around you. But unless you possess the skill of knowing how to spot these people, you will not find them and you will certainly not keep them. Because people like this who have all those three things, they need to be nourished. They want to be invested in and they want to grow. Yes, they want to get paid well, but mostly they're here because of what they want to do and who they want to become along the way. And so if you are not the leader that can help them get there, you can't spot them, you cannot invest in them, then you're going to lose those people. And so what is your job as a leader? Okay, your job is to, one, identify the people with high potential. You have to have the ability to spot them. The second is you have to invest in actually training them. Third is you have to let them go. You've got to let them do their thing and you've got to not micromanage. And lastly is just get the fuck out of their way. Let them do their thing. So what I want to go into now are three principles that you can use to spot high potential leaders. Over the last 9 years, my main focus as a founder and CEO of a company has been how to find people with talent. People ask me all the time, like, what's the secret? It must be the marketing, it must be this, it must be the funnel. Go look at any piece of it. Those things on their own are not strong. What is strong is the team that we have assembled. And behind every great business that we've built, Gym Launch, Allen, Prestige Labs, acquisition, it is a team of people behind it. It is not just me and Alex, it is the team that has been able to do it. And so I will preach this until somebody actually gets it, but this is how you actually grow a company. Okay, and so I want to teach you guys the three frames that I use to spot leaders that I know can grow a company. The first principle that I want to explain is that to spot a high potential leader, you look for rate of progress, not rate of performance. So what you want to do is you want to promote people for their potential, not just their current performance. Okay, so what does that mean? Is you want to hire, recruit, and promote people for what they can do in the future, not just what they do in the present. Now, this sounds kind of weird, so let me break it down for you. Basically, a lot of people, you'll hire somebody. Say they come in as a VP of marketing, and they're a good performer, and they continue to perform like this. They just have consistent performance. That's good, but what does that tell you about the future? If you were to promote them, is it likely that they will grow? No. A lot of people think if I promote someone, they will grow. It's actually the opposite. If somebody is growing, you promote them. And so you actually want to look at how quickly somebody's growing in a company, not their current performance. Because somebody who has great performance but has not shown improvement over a year is unlikely to improve in the future. Whereas somebody who's actually at a sales manager, but they've started as a salesperson, and before that they were BD, and before that they were doing cold calls, and they've been able to go and jump 4 steps ahead in just a year, that person has a higher growth trajectory than this person. And so a lot of people make the mistake of saying, I brought this person in, they're really good, and I think they'd be good in this other role. So if I promote them, they will grow. But the reality is you actually want to find the people who they might be a step or two behind, but their rate of growth is really freaking fast. I'm sure you could all think of somebody like this. And now you're probably thinking to myself, oh crap, I've promoted all these people who come in and they've been great, but they haven't continued to grow. And that is exactly where a lot of companies get stuck, is they promote people who are good performers, have consistent performance, but they're not promoting the people who consistently get better. What somebody's done in the past in your company is the biggest indicator of what they'll do in the future. If somebody's consistent in performance, that's good. But if we promote them, they're unlikely to suddenly become a different person and quickly grow. Whereas if somebody's continued to be growing over time and time again, and then you promote them, they're going to keep growing. The growth was not because of the promotion was because of the growth. If you consistently over-promote people who do not have that growth trajectory, then your organization will quickly underperform because those people hit their level of competence. If they could grow more, they would. Most people will do that. But the reality is they're probably at their capacity. And so you want to look for people who continue to break through that capacity time and time again, because the likelihood they do in the future is much higher. An example of this is when I was building Allen, and I was taking people from Gym Launch to help me build Allen. I had a woman, and she started off as an administrative assistant. And then she went from an administrative assistant to an events manager. And then she went from an events manager to a customer success manager. And then I was at a point where I was like, I really need a VP of customer success for the software company. And I started interviewing all these VPs from the outside, thinking like, I need to hire this fancy person to come in and do all these things. And what I couldn't help that was gnawing in the back of my head was I kept looking at her. You know, she'd gone in 14 months from an administrative assistant to an amazing CSM. And I saw that she had leadership capabilities and quality. She was already kind of quasi leading the team. But I felt like, well, there's got to be a lot that, she just hasn't learned yet. She has to learn, so I should bring in this other person. And after going through the interview process, what I realized was, if she's been able to learn all these other things in such a short period of time, what's stopping her from learning this next one? I know how to do the job. I can help her get there. And if anything, she'll be more loyal. She's probably going to perform better. She's a better culture fit. And so what I did is I actually gave her the job instead. And she became the best head of customer success that I had ever had. She was phenomenal, like 11 out of 10, beating all of these other people I'd interviewed who'd been doing the job for 15 or 20 years. What that really taught me was it's not always great that somebody's done a job for 15 years. Because if you haven't continued to excel and improve, what does that say about that person? It says that they're not growth oriented, that they've already hit their level of capacity. And what she had done is she had just continued to improve her rate of progress, and her rate of progress is very high. So what happened when I put her in this new role is it just continued to go in that direction. Whereas for a lot of people, if I brought someone from the outside, I'm sure they would be good, but I don't think that they would have continued to excel at the rate that she had. The second principle that you want to apply when looking for high potential players is to look for and prioritize humility over arrogance. I cannot tell you how many times I talk to people at our events in our portfolio, and they promote somebody who's the loudest in the room, who displays the most confidence in the room, who talks the most. And what they don't realize is that humility is usually a better indicator of success and of potential than misplaced confidence. Because a lot of times somebody speaks a lot because they're trying to make up for the fact that they might not do a lot. Somebody has to talk about how good they are because their actions don't speak loud enough. We want to look for people who don't over promote themselves. They let their work speak for them. And a lot of times, if you look, there's a lot of studies on this. People overlook others in the workplace who are quieter and who don't talk as much, who don't take up as much space on meetings. But here's the thing, high potential leaders often don't know they are. When someone is unskilled, they often don't see their own faults. Whereas on the other hand, when someone is exceptionally competent at something, they often doubt their abilities and don't know how good they actually are. And so it comes naturally to them because they don't actually know how hard it is. And so an example of this is that I had a customer service department when we were building Gym Launch. And I had two girls that I had hired, and they were both great. One was very shy, her name was Leah. And then another girl was much louder. Her name was Deetra. Deetra was always talking, was always telling me what needed to happen, was always saying what needed to be done. And so I really needed a lead of customer service. And so what did I do is I promoted Deetra because she was always talking, she was telling me what she think needed to happen. Within about 4 to 6 weeks, I realized, I was like, I don't know if I promoted the right person. Because I looked and I was watching what was happening, and Leah was actually doing a lot of work for Deetra behind the scenes. She wasn't asking for the credit, she wasn't trying to take the credit, and she wasn't even trying to show off to me. She was just doing it because that's who she was. And so I actually went to Deetra 5 weeks after I promoted her and I said, listen, I've made a mistake. You might be able to feel it because you've been asking Leah for a lot of help, but I can see it, which is I think I promoted you when I shouldn't have. And I actually think I should have promoted her instead. And I was very honest about it. And what's crazy is this was the only time in the history of doing this that somebody has actually understood that. And so they both stayed on the team, and Leah took over. And though she was so quiet, she was one of the best leaders that I ever had. Because what did she do? What do quiet people do? What do people that are shyer do? They're always constantly giving credit to the team, taking blame on themselves, taking responsibility on. They're always doing and making sure they're getting the job done rather than talking and trying to show off, putting the credit on others rather than promoting themselves to get it. And that is what you want to look for. Is a lot of times what happens is the person that's the loudest on the meetings and on the team gets the attention. And they're the person that we think, oh, this is the person I'm supposed to promote, right? But reality is that's actually not usually the person. A lot of the best leaders I've had, they've been people that are quiet. People I've had to pull confidence out of. And I've had to encourage them and breathe confidence into them. But here's the thing. It's a lot easier for me to encourage somebody and create and give them more confidence through the things that they go through and through the encouragement I put upon them, rather than to find somebody who thinks their shit don't stink and try and temper them down and tell them that they're not that great. Be really careful because a lot of leaders, we overlook this. We think that the best people are the loudest. We think that the best people know that they're the best. The reality is it's often the opposite. And also, let's be real. Who wants to follow somebody who keeps talking about how freaking awesome they are? Nobody wants to follow somebody who talks about how great they are. People want to follow people who talk about how great they are. The third principle when it comes to spotting high potential players is to embrace extremes. Extreme gifts are often matched by an extreme weakness. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're probably thinking about yourself, right? I can think about myself. What's interesting is that a lot of people are looking for someone who's very well-rounded. They're looking for a head of marketing, and they're like, wow, this guy, he's so good at marketing, but he's just not great with details and organization. Well, what I would like to say is this is why we have teams and not just people. You yourself cannot build an entire company. That's why you need a team around you, because I don't look at it as what person and how balanced one person is, but I look at how balanced a team is. The reason that we don't have teams of one is because it's damn near impossible, unless somebody's been doing it for a very long time, for someone to have every single trait a 10 out of 10. The reality is if you want somebody to be incredibly good at one thing, they've probably ignored and not nourished other areas of skills. And so they might be brilliant at a couple things and terrible at others. But you don't want those shortcomings to scare you away from the fact that they might be really freaking good at the job. And so instead of focusing on someone's flaws, you want to try and get them only working in their strengths, and then find people to put around them whose strengths are their flaws. This is how you build a team. It's not that every person is perfect. It's that there's opportunity in one person's flaws for the other person to be strong there. And that's how they balance each other out. An example of this would be me and Alex. A lot of people might look at Alex and say that, he's just too into marketing. He's too focused on brand. He's too focused on content. He's not operational enough, detail-oriented enough. He doesn't slow down enough. Or someone might look at me and they might say, oh my gosh, she can be too cautious sometimes. She's overthinking too often. She needs to be able to take some risks. So what happens? Neither of us have tried to, really hone in on fixing our weaknesses. Instead, we've said, well, how great is it that we have each other? This is why we have each other, because together I get to focus on my strengths. He gets to focus on his strengths. And then together we make an amazing team. And this is how it works for everybody. If you're scared of the fact that somebody is weak in one area, you don't need to be scared if you have a plan for putting somebody else there who is strong in the area they are weak. And so the question is, why do we miss these things? Well, even the most experienced leaders often don't see the amount of talent that they're sitting on. The daily demands of the job get in the way. They're too busy doing the day-to-day things. So developing teammates gets put last. Leaders especially have to keep account of their time. Why? Because where a leader's time goes is one of the most valuable resources in the company. How you manage your time and attention precedes how much money you will make. Meaning you have to learn how to manage your time and attention before you know how to use it to make money. And so this isn't just for the founders in the company, it's for all the leaders underneath. And so the number one thing that I see people miss is they spend all their time trying to tread water, and they're not putting the time into developing people, to creating a succession plan, to developing talent that's already on the team. Instead, they put all their time into, well, I guess I need to find new people because nobody has the skill. And so the question is, where are you spending your days? Is it managing tasks? Is it checking quality of work? Is it approving decisions? If you're doing that, then eventually you are the bottleneck. And if you don't have high potential leaders in the pipeline, you will be the bottleneck and the reason that your business cannot grow. Because what happens once you hit capacity and you have nobody else underneath you to give it to? You stop. The business stops growing. And so I can guarantee you that if you trade the time of approving decisions, managing tasks, like doing all the day-to-day, for coaching your team, you would save yourself loads of hours and you'd be able to grow your company much faster. Because this is called being a proactive leader rather than a reactive leader. Proactive leaders always prioritize developing their team. This is something that has taken me years to understand, and the reason I think it's so important is because the reason I'm able to grow a company quickly is not because of any magic trick, it's because of this stuff. I know how to pick the right people, and I prioritize developing them, giving them feedback, training them, having them watch me, having them shadow me, telling them how they can get better, and giving them opportunity, and then getting the fuck out of their way. That is where all of my headspace goes. Because I know that the only way to relieve yourself, the only way to nourish talent, the only way to grow a company is to find and grow people as my number one priority. And so the question just is, does your calendar reflect that? What I want you to do is go look at your calendar right now and ask yourself, am I actually even putting time towards it? It's no, I gave feedback that one time 6 weeks ago. But do you actually designate time for your team to give them that feedback, to help them and to nourish them? Because a lot of times what happens is that companies get bloated because you hire people and the reality is nobody's 100% perfect. Everyone has at least 30% that they need to get developed. Eventually, extrapolate that out enough and you hire all these people and never develop them, then you have a bunch of half-baked cookies. And then you go to the store and you buy baked cookies and say, great, I'm just gonna bring some in. And then what do you have? This big hodgepodge mess. This is how companies get bloated. That's not how it works. If it was, I would tell you to do that if it actually worked, but it doesn't. Instead, you've got to invest in talent, you've got to nourish them, and you've got to develop them. And the thing is, if you're sitting here thinking, gosh, Layla, that sounds great, but I just don't have time. You have time, you just don't have priorities. And you haven't yet understood this because maybe you haven't gone through enough pain yet. The thing is, the difference between humans and animals is that you can learn from the mistakes of others. A lot of animals can't. They don't have that intellectual ability. And the thing that has always stuck with me since the first day I ever started a business was that I would rather learn from the mistakes of others than learn from myself. And so please learn from my mistake and do not prioritize the doing of the tasks and the doingness over the developing of your entire team. Because the reality is you don't lack time, you lack priorities. And so again, to recap, we want to look for people who have the capacity, the character, and the motivation. And then the 3 principles we want to use once we've identified those people is prioritizing humility over arrogance, promoting for rate of progress rather than current performance, and embracing extremes rather than shying away from them. So here's the thing. Intelligence is the speed of learning. It's the ability to apply a new behavior to the same circumstance. What I want you to do after watching this video, if you actually want to learn, is that you're going to go look at the org chart you have now. You're going to go look at your team. I want you to identify who's the first person that stands out as a high potential player. And I want you to put together a plan for how you're going to develop that person into being a leader who can grow your company.